All right, so welcome everyone again. So it's good even on KL we have a bit more people coming on site, but I really believe the Lord is causing us to be different, One of the things that affect us the whole of last year is just that uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. And remember, this is a month of Tevet, and the Lord is causing us to have an increased level of discernment so that we're able to see through. I call this the bullshit detector. And that's what Christians need to have. We need to look at what the government is saying, what the media is saying, and call it out for what it is. Because so many times we allowed the spirit of fear to cause us to conform to a way of the authority. And I'm not saying we are going against civil authority. Romans 13 is very clear. We are to honor and submit to civil authority. But there comes a time we have to call them out for what it is, and we have to do what we're supposed to do as believers. So what I wanted to do today is a two-part teaching, and I think Apostle Michelle will have two teaching today also. So today will be a very full-on kind of thing, and that's what we like, right? We like full-on, and you only need to come 1.5 days. No need to be here for too long. But I want to talk about how to prophetically pivot. Pivot is you are changing your position. It's a sports terminology, but it's just something I felt like is very applicable because we need to change our posture so that we are ready. In fact, we're not even in 2020 anymore, right? That has passed. Today is 2021, 1st of January. And the first one I want to talk about is we need to make some sense into the chaos of last year. Because if we don't have a conclusion, if we don't come to a place of peace, we will not be able to move on into this coming year. So once again, welcome to starting the year off right. I think this is the second or third year we have been doing. And I remember the past few years, always very exciting. We have all the cities here. And somehow Judah is great. Just now Judah was really good, and we really enjoyed the anointing, the open heaven, and even the prophetic words. But it's not the same when the cities are not here. And this is just an annual gathering we do because we want to kickstart the new civil calendar. We call this civil calendar. And it's also sort of like a regional gathering for the cities, especially in West Malaysia. We always go to Cebu, right? 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a year, which is great. I mean, it's time for some tourism activities also. But I really hope by Passover we'll be able to go there and, not go there for just 2 days, maybe 3 or 4 days, a bit longer, okay? So this one is really the one that we do for the cities here, so that people can just drive down, drive up. You don't have to go very far away. Now, this is the month of Tevet, I already mentioned. And Tevet is very special because it is a time where the Hebrew calendar intersects with the civil calendar. So that means it is a time where God wants His revelation. God wants His wisdom to begin to impact the way we operate on a civil calendar level. So that's why this is a month. And during the first fruit teaching a few weeks ago, I talked about that, is that we must increase our capacity to discern and to judge. And I think the year 2020 has been a great case study. And case study in terms of, I want to say this in a very nice way, okay? Case study in terms of highlighting the, I want to use the word stupid, okay? It's not stupid, but it's just the ignorance, the level of ignorance that has been accentuated by fear. So it's really a great case study. And so this is the month where God is going to cause the spirit within us to have that level of boldness, but not just boldness. By the way, do you know that if you are very bold, but there is no discernment, there is no wisdom, you are like, you run so fast, you run into the wall, right? So we need that discernment, that capacity to judge. So that's why we're gathering here. And all the other cities, I know some are gathering in living rooms, some are in your center, some just your handphone or whatever, it doesn't matter. But we have done our level best to increase the quality of the sound. So we really want to give a shout out to Anthony and his team. I really felt the difference the past few months. It has been great. And transitioning to YouTube Live, just make it much more enjoyable, okay? So it's good if you have a big screen and just blast it on your PA system. That will really help to get the feel. Okay, so let's talk about the topic today. Let's look at last year, okay? This is day one of the new year. It has proven to be extremely challenging for many people. I mean, unless you're from another planet. you will face some level of challenge. And we begin to see the usage of the term new normal. You saw this term, right? And you know what is new normal? It means that certain things have changed. It will never be the same again. And for some people, this is very hard. For the very sentimental people, they're like, it's like some people, they go back to their hometown and suddenly they realize their favorite food no longer in production. I remember those days when I was saying, actually, I've been staying in KL for almost 10 years already, and I felt that more in KL, that shops come and go very quickly. But when we go back to Cebu is a smaller town, some shops just continue on forever, And so it's like after 5 years, it's still here. And the most surprising thing is the menu is still the same. The price is still the same. So, but even then, 2020 has been a challenging time even for this sort of establishment. And things will never be the same again. But one of the things that we had to look and begin to understand is that we are the people of God, right? We are created and we are equipped in such a manner that we are supposed to be able to survive. By the way, not just surviving. Because how many people you have seen, they are Christians, but their life just surviving. I'm a survivor. It's not good enough to be a survivor. You need to thrive. You need to prosper in any environment. So don't think I'm just a survivor. You should be something much higher than that. Another thing we have to remember, just to look back at the year, every challenge presents new opportunities. So we always talk about people losing wealth, people becoming poor. But do you know that the Great Depression in the 1930s in US, it created more millionaires than ever? So every time you have a crisis, there is an opportunity. So I want to just encourage everyone, because we have the revelation from God, we should be able to take advantage of the opportunity. So that's why I just want to focus on these two teachings today. It is the right time for us to make the necessary prophetic adjustment. It's really the way we hear God, the way we calibrate ourselves, the way we approach the overall revelation. So that as we come to 2021, not even come, we are already in 2021, we can begin to perceive what God is doing in a more accurate manner. Okay, so two-part teaching, and the first one is really making sense of the chaos of 2020, so it's more of a prophetic analysis and try to just show you what the enemy has been trying to do, okay? And then the second part is let the sons of God arise, is really what is our action, because when I was hearing the prophetic words just now, it's all great, but it just come to my mind that God is requiring a choice. He's requiring a response from us. So the sons of God can arise, but we have to do that. By the way, ladies, you are also sons of God. That's a position of privilege, a position of grace based on the relationship with Father. Okay, now let's talk about concept of pivot. Okay, now some of you may not even have heard this word before. Okay, you can look at your dictionary, things like that. But it's a term used in construction. So sometimes it's like, how do you move the wood and things like that. Those in interior design or construction, But it's also used in sports. So if you play basketball, this is used very, very often. Now in basketball, pivot is an act where the player plants his foot. Have you seen a player? One foot is planted, but then that foot cannot move, because if you move it, it's a trouble already. But the other foot, you are free to do, and you can do whatever positioning. So the whole idea about pivot is you're trying to get a superior position without bouncing off the rule. So that's the thing, it's about movement. So we can look at pivot as a series of adjustments. And it can be big adjustment, it can be small adjustment. It doesn't matter. Small or big, every move or pivot can have major impact on the overall performance and desired result. Sometimes people just change a little bit of things in their life, and their lives are changed drastically, right? So later, in part 2, I'll show you the exact thing, but let me just tell you, space shuttle, not space shuttle, those rocket goes to moon one, okay? Because recently my son is very interested in all this kind of thing, so I begin to learn. The thing that landed on moon is called lunar module, but that thing is not what comes back to Earth. Comes back to Earth is what we call command module. And when they go back to Earth, they have a very narrow angle. If it's too steep, they will go in too fast and they will burn and die. If it's not steep enough, they will be bounced off by the atmosphere and cannot come into Earth. So they have a very narrow, it's almost like 5 to 6 degree angle. So that's why I'm trying to tell you that a small pivot, a small adjustment can have huge impact in your life. So do not underestimate the small things God asks you to do. And sometimes the Lord is saying, I want you to give up one thing in your life. And if you're obedient, suddenly you can see your entire life change. Okay, continue. So one of the prophetic words now, going back 1 year ago, I just remember the last year, starting the year off right, 2020, and I looked down, there are some people who just came that time, and we had people coming and going. But that time we had a prophetic word, I think it was released by me, and we're talking about there's a shifting from a regular boat to an aircraft carrier. Then Passover and Pentecost, I did that teaching again. So if you need a refresh, go back to our YouTube channel, you can look at it because it's a very important fundamental teaching. So those are the kind of prophetic words that signify a drastic change of posture. So imagine you're living on a boat, and suddenly God said, I want you to go to a submarine, an aircraft carrier. It's like suddenly open the cupboard full of weapons, full of new gadgets. And some people just cannot handle that. But the Lord is causing a drastic change of posture at the beginning of last year. And what it is an indication of the future. Everyone says future. You see, God shows us the future that He wants us to be in, but it requires actions. Everyone say actions. So that's why I want you to think, what is the future you want? What are the actions that you need to take? And then that will enable. See, we need to learn to expand our capacity. Remember earlier last year when we had the Apostle Vanna Masterclass, I think one of the things she kept on saying is expanding the capacity. It's really, how do you cause yourself to do more with what you have? And I think another thing we need to understand is we need to acknowledge that the ecclesia, I'm talking about the overall body of Christ, we have not operated at our optimal level. We have not even, if I want to put a number, I'll say not even 10%. We have not even done 10% of what is required. And because remember, Jesus commissioned us from His full authority, right? So sometimes we behave as if we have no authority, even at our personal life. So that's why one of the things going forward into this new year is we have to remember the church's greatest days are ahead of us. So sometimes we look at the news, we look at, everything, it felt very depressing. Look at our nation, our government is crap and things like that. But the church's greatest days are ahead of us. We are supposed to be able to change the spiritual climate that will cause this nation to go into the direction that will be honoring to God. So that's our objective as the ecclesia. Okay, so let me just quickly talk about, the commission of ecclesia, what we're supposed to do. This can be a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 part teaching, but I'm just going to use one slide to super summarize the whole thing. Because just to refresh, what are we called to do? We need to remember the task. Everyone say task. So there is an assignment, there is a mission, and very simply say Matthew 28, 19 to 20 is to make disciples of all nations. That means we are to say that a nation truly follows Jesus. It doesn't mean that it's a Christian nation, by the way. It doesn't mean that it needs to have a Christian government. But it means that the teaching of Jesus is influencing the nation, that it affects its identity, its purpose, and its assignment. Now, this is, by the way, a continuation of the dominion mandate which God originally gave, Genesis 1:28, to Adam and also Eve. A lot of people say, to Adam only. No, it's to both of them. To both male and female, you're supposed to do whatever you need to do so that the entire world will be made in the image of God. Then, of course, we know what happened, right? Genesis 3, Satan usurped that authority, stolen from Adam, but Jesus came back as a second Adam, reclaim it back. Okay, here's a very important thing. After Jesus obtained it, what did He do? He prophesied in Matthew 16, I have given you the church. Who are the church? So it's the right question is who are the church? It's not what is the church. It's not a building. It's not an organization. We are part of the collective church. Jesus gave us the keys of heaven. And what is the authority? What is the power? We can bind and restrict the power of darkness. That's why when we see bad news, when we see things we don't like, it is our obligation to bind and restrict based on what God has given us. to loose and release the power of blessings. So sometimes we see things are not well, people are not being blessed. So there is that ability. It's all based on the keys of heaven. So practically, what do? We have to affect the spiritual atmosphere. That's why the gathering is not here. Here is just to receive revelation, to equip ourselves, and then we have to go outside to affect the spiritual atmosphere. And to what extent, this is the target so that nations can be disciples. So it's a one slide summary. We have to remember this is a commission, this is the assignment. And by the way, sometimes when we hear the word ecclesia, we're like, oh, not me. It's those people, it's the apostles, it's the big prophet. No, every one of you has a portion. And later on, I think in part 2, I'll show you one of the parable where Jesus said everyone has an obligation. Everyone is supposed, in fact, the word he used is do business, okay? The parable in Luke. Okay, but that's ahead of us. Okay, let's talk about chaos of 2020. Everyone say chaos. You know, sometimes when you look at the word, by the way, do you know the word chaos, actually, the original word refers to a person, refers to a spirit. So chaos is a person and a spirit. So it's like a personification of all the fear and things. So this one goes all the way back to the Dark Ages. Remember Dark Ages? You had the black plague and things like that, and people died, and you had people sneeze and everyone got scared. So we are sort of back into the Dark Ages because people are so scared of things. You know, if someone sneezes, everyone will be like. So I'm really glad I'm looking down. Nobody is wearing masks and things like that. By the way, you know it doesn't really work. And so the events of 2020 took place, and much of the world is still reeling for it. I know people are recovering. And one of the things, of course, I see Malaysia. In some ways, I felt we are a bit fortunate. We haven't been going to that crazy extent. But still, it affects everyone in the world. Now, the first thing about what happened in 2020, and that is important for us to make sense, is this. We need to remember and understand that God allowed it to happen. Now, it doesn't mean that He caused it to happen. Two different things, okay? He did not create the pandemic, but remember Romans 8:28, all things, He can use it for His glory. All things, He can use it for the good of those who love Him. And what we need to remember and understand is that this is a teaching moment for the ecclesia. 2020 is a teaching moment for us because this year is being used by God to expose what we call the spiritual swarm. In fact, Chuck Pierce prophesied almost 2 years ago. And he said the swarm, the draining of the swarm will continue for 2 years until 18th of January. He said that 2 years ago. I mean, then you see the whole world is in chaos. So that's why the swarm is being drained, but at the same time, God is showing us the future war of the ecclesia. Because the warfare never stops. And I know there are some people who are like, okay, I wish the war will stop. But you see, if there is no war, you are not able to possess what is rightfully yours. It's like, can you imagine Joshua, Caleb, they are on the other side of Jordan, and they're like, we are here, we don't want to fight. We will just be happy to camp outside Jericho forever. And then you have 3 million people. It's like, we want city, we want city, we want land. You know, can you imagine that? And no, we just came here for another 40 years. So that's the thing. If you don't want to war, that means you don't want to have what is rightfully yours. And we all have bloodline issues. We all have historical issues. And some of us, you know, we know that our family has certain legacy, but that has been stolen from us. So only warfare can get it back. So what do we mean by swarm? Okay, swarm, of course, you have the natural swarm. But spiritual swarm is a place of hiding. So remember, we talk about sheep in wolves' clothing. So that's the kind of picture. Hiding place for many creatures, spiritual creatures. And then they begin to draw power from darkness. Every evil on earth has to worship a dark power in order to obtain power. I mean, this is just the progression. Because you have to remember Genesis 1. When God created earth, it was a whole sphere of water. Do you know that? It was water. And so darkness harvests it. So it talks about it was in void, it was in chaos. By the way, chaos was used in that Genesis 1. So it's referring to all the demonic forces that has been cast down from heaven. They have been in water, I don't know for how long. So that's why everywhere you go, there are demonic forces. The dominion mandate is supposed to push them out. so that mankind can rule. But we know what happened, okay? Okay, let's continue. So one of the ways to make sense, and I think this is a great book by Apostle Chuck Pierce, Passover Prophecies. We still have some copies here. And gave us some prophetic insight into the matter. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Chuck Pierce because in the 80s, he received basically a vision, a long vision, prophetic word about the future war of the church, all the way to 2022. And that was in the 80s. And then, so he kept it himself. He shared with some trusted people. Then, by the time they did the Great Prayer Movement was from the 90s to late 90s, okay? 10 years of extreme success in evangelism. Millions and millions of people. So by the end of 90s, people are like, oh yeah, we're ready for 1 billion souls. See, people still thinking about souls saved. They are not thinking about nations discipled. So he began to just look at the prophetic word, and one of the publishers heard about his sharing and said, you have to write this down as a book. Then he said, no, I'm not going to write it. So after going back and forth, he decided to publish The Future War of the Church in the year 2001. Beginning of it, January. And then, you know what happened? Because that was the end of the Great Prayer Movement, people are like so high. You know, sometimes people are so high with revival and things like that. That's why I say revival without reformation and change to nation, it will amount to nothing. That's why sometimes we are so proud about our nation, only revival, the burial revival, but we have to ask ourselves, what is the impact in terms of changing the nation? Zero. I'm not saying this to say that it's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing. It is a good thing, but it didn't change the nation. We shouldn't be addicted to revival. So anyway, that's the feeling of the church after 10 years of great success all over the world. You know, they went to Mount Everest. Can you imagine intercessors climb Mount Everest? They went to that place. They look around. There's not a single church. 10 years later, there's like a few thousand churches around the Himalaya. So it was great. It was great. So in the midst of that kind of high emotional feeling, he published a book on warfare. And he was criticized left, right, and center. He said, Chuck, how can you talk about this? How can you talk about that? You know, when the prophet wants to release something, they don't care because they know it is from God. And guess what? 9 months later, 9/11 happened. So that really changed the whole picture. So that's the thing. And when I look at Passover prophecies, I just felt like this is like the future war of the church, volume 2. Okay, this is what he says. The danger, talking about United States, but applies to many, many nations, is not that it will become a communist country, but rather a very materialistic, control-driven nation, where the constitution has limited authority. That means the rule of law is being thrown away and is preempted by economic resources. Basically, if you have money, you are the king. Sounds like us, right? Remember? Cash is king. Who said that? The guy is a bit silent now, but he's still there, because I believe he still has a cash. So cash is king. Then, some more. This will limit our freedom and liberty. In other words, we must war against the spirit of Mammon for God's economy to reign. So the whole issue is money, the love of money, the spirit of Mammon. Those are the key things that causes people. So when you look at the year 2020 and all the things that happen, the root of it is money, the love of money. But never mind, he says something, whenever you give a prophetic word, if it's a very negative word, you better have a positive conclusion. This is what we mean by EEC, right? So God has ways for his people to survive and eventually thrive in this economic war. So we need not to be afraid, but we have to understand that there is a real warfare that is happening. This is a very short book, very easy to read book, but very enlightening, and really is volume 2 of the future war. So we can be assured that the people of God can and will prevail in every scenario. And that's why this gathering is important. It is for us to cause ourselves to align properly. God is now realigning his people so that we can be ready for the next generation of warfare. And I just remember, we are now in the second year of pay, right? And we're like, what happened to pay? Pay is like, the first year is like nobody can remember anything because it's such a chaotic year. But I suddenly remember when Chuck came to Cebu the last time, he did say the next decade, 10 years, is going to be a massive warfare, and Borneo is going to be famous. And I think we're like, oh yeah. You know, I think we all hear the part, Borneo will be famous, but we didn't hear the part, it's going to be massive warfare. So yeah, we'll be famous. But famous for what? And it's like, you know, Indonesia is moving the capital there and things like that. Things are happening, I tell you, eventually people will be like, where is that place? Isn't that place where you have the orangutan and things like that? So it's very interesting because there is a next generation of warfare. We have to choose. It's like, can you imagine if you are Israel, if you don't want to be with Joshua and Caleb, what do you do? You stay in the wilderness. So that's, my friend, those are the options for us. We either choose the next generation of warfare or you choose exile. I'm telling you now, you have to make a choice. If you don't want to continue with this, you are going to be in exile and wilderness. This is just how it is. That's why we need to learn how to pivot. So it's like, you know, if you play basketball, you know, especially if you're not the tall player, you know, you're like shorter player, and you're like always trying to get the position. So, but if you're a tall player, you just wait there and it's just so easy. But that's the thing. We are wrestling with giants. You know, you go to Canaan, there are giants, and pivot, to adjust, to change, and especially in the realm of prophetic, because one of the things about prophetic, and I know all of you here, all the cities that are linked with us, you have become very prophetic, but it is so easy to go into the routine prophetic. And it's like, oh, this is what the Lord say, and not really challenging ourselves to hear more accurately, more carefully. So that's why we need to learn to discern, Mammon or Tevet. Identify new generation enemies. I know the Bible says everything is the same, there's nothing new on earth, but the package, the strategy is a bit different. And the enemy is very, very smart. And their goal is to seek to stop the progression of the ecclesia. So that's why last year, 2020, it is a great year because in the sense that we finally understood what we're supposed to do. I think what God did is that He began to expose all the enemies. And then suddenly said, look, this is going to be your exam. Now, anyone has done open book exam before? You know, when I was in university, law student, and a lot of people are surprised. I thought lawyers are supposed to memorize things. And, you know, my memory is just terrible. But more than half of my exams are open book. Now, I tell you, if you've never done open book before, don't be deceived. It's harder. Because open book, we're like this. This is the question. This is the issue. So 2020 is like God showing us these are the enemies. And you're like, wow, how to fight all this? It's like the enemy is so much bigger than the traditional enemy, right? It's not your typical just, you know, dealing with personal issue. We're now dealing with national issues. We're now dealing with global issues. But that is the reason why last year was a great year from that perspective. So I want to talk quickly, and this future warfare of the church, we can go on and on, but I don't want to bore you, but just a few major points. Then I want to talk about how we should handle it. You know, it's like, does that mean we don't need to obey the government and things like that? No, I'm not suggesting anything crazy like that. But I just felt like we need to have discernment. We need to have wisdom. So some of the future war, the first one is we are going to face civil authority that tramples freedom and liberty. In fact, Apostle Chuck Pierce said this many years ago. He said lawlessness will become so great that the government is going to be lawless. And he's like, at that time, we are like, okay, like in Malaysia, we can sort of understand. But in the United States, they can't. But finally, they can. You know, it's like, wow, the government can cheat like that. So this is something that is going to happen. And by the way, the good news is we have biblical example. We have biblical guidelines. We know how we can respond. Then the next thing is, there's going to be mind control. Everyone say mind control. The media is trying to do a mind control over everyone. And I'm not saying you don't read newspaper, you don't go to your social media. In fact, I do that a lot. And maybe, I'm just thinking, what's right? Maybe 25% of my time is spent on that. Plus or minus. And so it's like you want to be able to discern, you want to be able to see, but allow the prophetic revelation and protection of God help us to process. So it's by media, it's social media, and we call, you know what is big tech? Big tech are those big technology companies. Basically, they have unlimited funding. They can do whatever they want. Then the thing that is being exposed last year is what I use Wall Street. Wall Street is, of course, the biggest stock exchange in the entire world. But what it represents is unbridled, uncontrolled greed, and is controlled by the spirit of Mammon. So remember what Apostle Chapter said in his book, that this is a root. That's why the Bible is correct. The root of many evil is love of money. It is there already. There's nothing new. Then, of course, we have the internal resistance by the ecclesia. That means some portion of the church is like not wanting to see that this is a new warfare. Now, we're not going to talk about all this, but I'm just trying to give you a big picture. These are the things that we have to face. And it's like, if you're a believer, you look at this, you're like, oh my. It's like, bad news. It's like, I want to be hiding in a cave, or I want to launch to space, stay in moon or whatever. So it's like, either we have to confront this, or we go back to wilderness. Two options only. Okay, let's talk about dealing with civil authority. I mean, in Malaysia, it's quite fashionable to criticize the government all day long. You go to coffee shop, that's what everyone do, right? So once in a while, you hear coffee shop rumor. So my father always say it's 41% accurate. Or 39%. There is some truth. And that's why, what is the hardest truth to discern? Is those myths between truth and falsehood. So that's why Tevet, remember, just kept on thinking, this is the month. This is the month. The revelation must come on. And that's why, the reason why the civil calendar and Hebrew calendar intersect is very simple. God is saying, my ways are higher than your ways. My revelation and my way of processing, if you will use it this month, and that's why I always like to observe people in Judah, because your ability to submit to the sound, it really reveals whether you are ready to submit to God now. Because if you're like, oh, let's move around, then you're like, oh, cannot move. It's like, some people, it's like, you can see the resistance. Now, I can say this because once upon a time, we are all like that, right? It's like, just don't want to submit to the sound, from the Greek mindset, from the traditional church. But I'm telling you, even from things like that, it's very important. That if there's a free spirit, it will allow us to hear God. Okay, dealing with civil authority. See, the next 10 years, we're going to see what we call the next level of test concerning biblical adherence versus civil disobedience. Now, what do I mean by that? You see the reference there, Acts 4. You remember Acts 4:19, what is the story? Peter and John were arrested, right? But the high council and the elders told them, you better don't share the gospel anymore. And you know what they reply? We are going to do what we believe is right. So basically, it's like, get lost or whatever, adds what you want to put in there. So basically, he said, look, if it is in accordance to my obedience to God, I'm not going to obey you. Then Daniel chapter 3, chapter 6, of course you know, right? His three friends, and then even he himself with the lion. He refused to bow. So we're going to have this sort of test. Now, but we need to understand the principle. It doesn't mean that every time you disagree with government, you can break the law. Okay, nobody can help you with that, okay? We are to submit, everyone says submit, Romans 13, to all civil authorities that have authority over us. But there's an exception, and the exception is that, except to the extent of direct contradiction with the Word of God. That means if it is against the Word of God, you can disregard it. So like Acts 4, cannot share the gospel. Daniel 3, must worship the idol. Daniel 6, same situation. Now let me just explain what is direct contradiction, because some people don't understand that. It has to be clear, it has to be obvious, not ambiguous, not based on interpretation, not even based on your own conscience. My conscience doesn't allow me to wear masks. Okay, fine, stay at home. But you want to go to public place. So, I don't believe masks really works, but I go to public place, I use because I have to follow the law. So if my conscience doesn't allow me to do it, then I don't go. Simple as that. So you cannot use the word conscience, because conscience is not direct contradiction. Conscience is about choices and giving up certain things, but when there is a direct contradiction to the command of God, like abortion, like divorce, etc., some things are very black and white. Then you also use common sense test. Does it pass the smell test? So it's like, if you say, okay, I don't want to follow the government, I'm talking about direct contradiction. Is it really, really contradicting the Word of God? Now, if your first reaction is not sure, I can tell you 99% it is not. Then don't even think about that, because they will really expose your own rebellion. Then, of course, if it has a direct contradiction to the Word, it should be obvious to the people of God. That means that's why the tribe is very important. The gathering is very important, because people begin to help you to balance up the truth. Anyway, coming back to this one again, we should have the discernment to judge. So often I'm just so surprised. And sometimes you hear even church fight, internal fight can go to escalate into public level, legal level. By the way, do you know the Bible talks about that? 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And Apostle Paul went to the church of Corinth, and finally there was a lawsuit even then. They had lawsuits even then. Because Roman civilization is quite advanced legally. You know what he say? 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Is there no one wise enough to adjudicate, to make a judgment over a dispute? That you have to go to the court of law? I deal with legal matter all the time, dispute matter all the time. By the time it goes to court, we always say, everyone lose. Only your lawyer earns the money. Because that's the thing. You are like, you have to pay this cost, you have to pay for valuation cost, court fee, whatever. If eventually you fight over 1 million, maybe, okay, what's left? 400,000. Seriously. So that's why, this is talking about normal situation. But in the body of Christ, in a spiritual tribe, it shouldn't even happen. We should be able to resolve dispute in-house. So that's why dealing with civil authority, remember, only direct contradiction. Now, I want to give you an example where churches are what we call civil disobedience, because it is going against the command of God. So recently, for example, churches in California challenging the state government because they say you cannot have 5 people, you cannot have more than 10 people to meet in a private venue. By the way, in Malaysia, do you know that? How many of you have concern over the legality of this kind of meeting? Come on, be honest. Some of you will have very concerned. But I can tell you this is a private premises. What we do in a private house, none of their business. We're not even a registered house of worship. So that was the issue when you try to restrict the ability to gather. Now, by the way, in the Bible, meeting together, is that something that God asks us to do? So when you try to stop that, that falls into direct contradiction. So of course, over there, they have tribes, all the different groups of denominations, they all come together because they want to preserve the basic right to worship. Now, I just want to talk quickly about the freedom to worship, freedom of religion, because it's very important in our Malaysian context, okay? So what is freedom of religion? By the way, if you study our constitution, it says there's freedom of religion. It says, okay? Basically, there's a freedom of choice of any expression of faith. That means you can choose what you want. In theory, that is. Okay? So, in fact, this is something that we want to go for, because at the end of the day, when you study the Word of God, it is all about the choices. God allows us to make choices and to have covenant, to have relationship with Him. But then we have the next level, which is freedom of worship, and which is what we're trying to do here now. That means freedom to worship peacefully. So, of course, if you are very loud and the tenant is sleeping and they come out and say, can you be a bit softer? Okay, be a bit softer. Otherwise, I'm going to call the police. So anyone ever did that to your neighbor, or neighbor did that to you? So now we are quite lucky because all our neighbors have moved out. Well, we have the Atta studio up there. I think they're music studio, okay? So they are okay. They already have treated room. Downstairs, I think nobody. Left side, also nobody, okay? So we will have the freedom to worship peacefully in any private place without disturbing others, okay? Now, what I want to try to say is that if you study the Bible, these are what we call now, it's a very legal term here, inalienable. You know what is inalienable? I'm not trying to teach you law today, okay? Basically, it's the rights that cannot be taken away. Cannot be taken away. So we have to understand that we have certain standing, we have certain spiritual authority, and when people ask us to do stupid things, let's begin to have revelations and do it in a legal and proper spiritual manner. Now, the other thing we need to remember is that man-made laws, laws are made by men, right? They are not perfect. And they often contradict the word of God. Now, I can use many Malaysian examples, but I'm going to use some American example here. But a lot of laws around the world are like that. So, for example, as early as 1896, okay, in 1896, how many years ago? 100? 150? Okay, so now you see the power of my maths. Okay, so 1896, this was after Civil War, by the way. And there was a court case, and this Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, they sanctioned racism and they sanctioned segregation. Basically, segregation is like this. You are a person of certain skin color, you cannot come to this school. You cannot come to this supermarket. That is what we call segregation. So they have segregation all the way until the 1950s. So just because it's the highest law, the court of the land, doesn't make it correct, right? So then, of course, many of you know Roe versus Wade, 1973, it legalized abortion as a federal right. Now, by the way, in US, you can have abortion in certain states, the more liberal one. But what this case does is it says that you can have abortion all over the country, and it is based on the right of privacy. Do you know how ridiculous this is? It means that it's trying to say that, look, you had a baby inside the mother's womb, and the baby is disturbing the mother. And therefore, the right of privacy allows the mother to terminate. These are 7 or 9 supposedly smartest lawyers in the land making this decision. So that's why God say, my ways are higher than your ways. And in this day and age, the wisdom of the world will be made stupid. Basically, God is saying that, and it's happening now. So what I want to say is, just because a law was enacted by the highest legal body of the land does not make it right in the eyes of God. So remember, God's ways are always highest. So I want to conclude this point with this. There are times where civil disobedience is permissible. But it has to be like the Daniel situation. It has to be like the Acts 4 situation. Okay? So not just because you don't like this, you don't like the sound of it, you don't like the restriction, then you don't do it. Okay, so you have to use a bit of wisdom. Okay, let's talk about the mind controlled by media. So some of you know, media is a topic that I really like, and just now we have a prophetic words that, people are going to arts and entertainment. So arts and entertainment and media, okay, they are a bit different, but they are somewhat linked, Nowadays, you look at media, all the talk show people, all the podcast people, it has become more like entertainment, right? By the way, do you know that podcast is a very lucrative business, huh? The big podcast can earn you millions. And YouTubers can earn, up to 50 to 60 million USD per year. I was so shocked the other day when I was checking, my daughter likes to watch a kiddie YouTube. Blippi, anyone watch Blippi? Blippi earns 40 million per year. It's amazing. It's like unbelievable. And you're like, he's like, but then of course you look at what they do, their production costs, they have to come out with all the things. So media is big money, but what's happening right now is because the media is trying to control the mind of the people, trying to control the story. And I want to say this because as people of God, we have to have certain revelation. We are called to counter culture. See, our minds are greatly affected by the things we consume and embrace. That's why if you see too much things, and sometimes you get a bit worried and you cannot sleep at night because you feel like the world is ending and things like that. So, but it's a balance, okay? You can't be hiding in a cave also. But I want to tell you, news you can consume, but try to discern what is real and what is fake. But if you are, I find that a lot of people who are worrying, maybe they watch too much End of the World show, or too much ghost story. Some people are very fearful because they watch ghost story all the time. So what you consume affects your mind. And many of us consume a large dose of what we call legacy, traditional media, but also the modern social media. So that's why, I just give you an example. Let's say a person always watch a news, there are some China channel always talk about communist is good, that kind of thing. Some people are like that. You know what happened? Communist is good. Or anything. Or I have found Christians who say, we should support Palestine. Because they are in university, they are kind of affected by those kind of. So we have to ensure that we have a legal, spiritual shield against all these attacks. So that's something that we had to develop over a period of time. Now, one of the things about year 2020 is, of course, we have extreme movement restrictions, right? So when's the last time you took a flight? Actually, not too long ago, we went to Cebu, right? 3 months ago, so that's pretty good. But overseas, I think I was in Australia when I heard about the closing of border, and I left just one day before, okay? So ever since then, no. After that, did I go to, no. I went to Australia first, then Singapore. Okay. Oh, Singapore, then Australia. Singapore was Chinese New Year. So there has been extreme movement, restrictions movement. So that is why social media becomes the avenue for people to go. They want to connect to people and things like that. So that is an okay thing, but you don't want to consume so many things that really mess up your mind. By the way, do you know that historically social media has been used to express and spread points of view that are not part of the mainstream thinking? So it's like, you know, you have newspaper, they always, especially in Malaysia, it's always a government position. Then you want to say something bad against government, you cannot put the Star News sign, nobody will publish for you. So what do? You go to Twitter, you go to whatever, you know. So those are the days. So remember just 10 years ago, Arab Spring. How many people can remember Arab Spring? The whole Arab political movement was caused by Twitter. Then you had the Hong Kong protests, which initially they used Twitter, and then I think Twitter sort of controlled by the main media. Then they use, nowadays people go for what? Telegram or whatever, different thing. Because they want to talk about certain social injustices, certain movement, okay? So this is a historical development. So then, of course, in 2016, now we talk about pivot, okay? Pivot is really the realignment. But 2016, you have what we call double pivot. And this double pivot is the Brexit and then Donald Trump's ascension into American presidency. It has permanently damaged their psyche. I'm talking about the media. The media has become crazy because of this. And you are seeing that manifestation for the last few years. So what has happened is that, because at the end of the day, remember what we've been saying, the root of all evil is the love of money. So that's why all these companies, you look at Twitter, you look at Facebook, these are big tech companies, but at the end, it's all about money, and more money. So through corporate and political control, they took over social media, they begin to censor, and they begin to propagate a narrative of certain preference. So for example, if you say certain things against the overall line of thinking of the liberals and progressive, for example, people now advocate gender change, right? They say, oh, you can change gender. And I think that was one of the controversy. What's the name of the author for Harry Potter? J.K. Rowling, and she was like into the debate about transgender. She was saying that it's not fair. You know, it's not fair because how can you have a man who changed into a woman compete against women? That's just ridiculous. I mean, if you're a sports coach, you'll be like, crazy. You know, the lung capacity, everything, just no need to compete. You might as well give the medal straight. So in the 60s, by the way, do you know that in the 60s, Germany was still two parts? You have East Germany, and they have athletes, you know, like super athletes just came out, but you look at them, they're like, doesn't look like female, looks like, yeah. So those of you old enough to watch those Olympic, you will know that they came out for a while, and then there was some controversy, and then they all disappeared. So J.K. Rowling was going into this discussion and say, shouldn't be all, and she was attacked very strongly by people, and said that, oh, you're bad, you're a lousy female representative, and things like that. So basically what happened is, if you have something against what they want to promote, they will attack you. So I'm telling you this is because when we want to influence for the kingdom of God, that will happen. And that requires the strength, that requires the wisdom and the spiritual force, because we have to bind the demonic forces behind all these things. What happened with media? They stopped being the promoter of news. Once upon a time, you read newspaper because you want to read news, right? I want to see what happened today, you know, what is the good news, what is the bad news, but most of the time now you go online, they don't have news, they have a lot of opinion. Why this is good, why that is good. I don't want to know about the why. I just want to know what happened yesterday. Did it rain yesterday? Things like that. So that's the thing. So I already mentioned this. Every dissenting view are treated with contempt. And what they do will be, they will start to call you, you are racist, you are bigots, you are sexist, whatever. So this is the thing that we are facing with. And I find that the church, the ecclesia, many look at this and they are scared. I better keep quiet. I better don't say anything. All the kids, okay, you better all don't join the arts and entertainment. It's very bad. It's very evil. So see, this is the ostrich mentality. Just hide. But let me tell you, if we don't do anything, it will not improve. Nothing will change. Because remember, we are called to change and shift the spiritual atmosphere. If we don't go in, who will do it? Then you're just going to let all these powers to take control. That's why I'm really excited to see people are interested in arts and entertainment, in media, government, all these things. Once upon a time, 30, 40 years ago, our parents would be like, no, don't go. But I say we need to encourage our people to go in because those are the mountains of influence, the mountains of power where you can change culture for kingdom, not for yourself. Of course, it's dangerous and things like that, but that's why we have to train them since young. Okay, some more. Why am I saying all these things? And you're like, oh, is this a political class? Is this a media class? And because this is what happened. I believe last year, the Lord has begun teaching the church. And the whole year, and it's now climaxing in the month of Tebet, how to discern truth from fiction. And it's like only when you get into the mess, you're like, okay, I know this is truth. This is not the truth. So I already mentioned this. The Lord is developing our bullshit detector. It's a smell test. Now, some people, intuitively, you are better with this. So let me just encourage you to do something very simple. You know the forwarded messages? When you receive it, please do some research. And I tell you, you just spend 1 minute of time. Most of the time, 99% is fake one. Fake one, then please don't send out. Please don't send out. Because that's how you develop your bullshit detector, okay? Then you can quickly discern. Because if they have a news, they quote someone, you go to Google, you go to wherever, you search, and there's not a single article from a reputable publisher, that means something is off, right? And sometimes, oh, you know, this person said that. And even in Malaysia, it happened already. People misquote people, but actually Malaysia is the opposite, you know. People say something very bad, and then later they'll say, oh, it was misquoted. The reporter misquoted me. I think there was one case in Sarawak. And they went there, and then the person, I think it's a Cebu politician, and he was like, no, I didn't say that. Then eventually, I think the newspaper have to publish the whole audio and let people judge for themselves. So that's the thing. So try to develop this. It will be very helpful in days to come. See, the Lord will cause us to see the plans. You see, what's happening with all this bad news is the plans and agendas of the enemy are being exposed. It's being revealed. 2020 is a dress rehearsal. You know what's dress rehearsal? It's like you're preparing for an actual battle. And we're preparing for the battle of nations for the entire pay. That's why I kept thinking about what Chad said. Borneo is going to be famous, and this is going to be a major, okay, now I remember the precise word he used. It's going to be a major theater of war. You know what is theater or not? Theater is used to describe an area of big fight. So for example, in World War II, Europe is one theater. Pacific is one theater. You know, it's like, can you imagine Pacific War or Europe War? So Borneo is going to be a theater. So interpret it how you want. So we need to sit back, buckle our belts, and get ready for this thrilling ride, okay? Okay, a few more things. Okay, so now we go back to the root of evil. Because at the end of this is where the most surprising revealing is that in 2020, the exposure is that we are seeing all these different forces working together. You have the communists, you have the socialists, you have the Wall Street, mainstream media, big tech, refer to Google, Facebook, Twitter, all those things. And then you have the permanent political class. You know what is permanent political class? That means they are always in power one. So maybe they retire, but their uncle or their nephew or their father or their grandson, somehow. You have certain family in UK, in Australia, in US, they are permanent political class. What's most surprising, and the Lord is exposing, is that they are all working together. And you're like, Communists and Wall Street, what connection they have? The connection is money, money, and money. See, they may be reporting to slightly different territorial and demonic bosses. They all have demonic bosses, by the way. Slightly different, but they have very similar broad objectives and agreement. Now, let me just remind you again why we are doing this teaching, because I want us to see these are the challenges ahead. And if it doesn't cause the fear a lot to come, it better. Because you know that using our conventional way of doing church, we can never tackle them. Impossible. So God is showing us this is a test. It's an open book test. That's why I say open book is not necessarily easier. In fact, one time, I have one exam. It's called open question exam. You know what is it? They give you the question. Everyone thought it's easy, but it was very hard. It's like when you had a question, you know the standard is so much higher already. You cannot, if you prepare a very normal answer, you just get a pass, or you may not even get a pass. So that's why God is exposing all these things so that we are ready. So what are their main similarity? They all love uncontrolled, unbridled materialism. That's why I remember Chuck Pierce was saying the concern is that it will become an uncontrolled materialism. That's why you look at China today. China is not communist. China is not socialist. China is driven by material. And that's why, do you realize that all the biggest, they say they own the most Rolls Royce in the world now? And so, all the cars in China, I just found out recently, it's like, you have BMW, right? So all the model is slightly different. Jared, you're in this industry, you will know. It's like you have a certain model. In cars in Australia, always a bit bigger. Or the same model. Because, okay, their humans are taller. China people, okay, not taller than us, okay? But their cars are bigger than a Western car. Because there is a need to show off. So all the model, let's say it's a BMW 5 Series, they will be 10 cm longer. Custom one. Because, you see, that's why I remember a show we watched before. I think it's Matrix, and there was one evil program, and he was like, very powerful already. Then he asked a rhetorical question. When a person has a lot of power, what else do they want? More power. So when you have a lot of materialism, what do you want? More materialism. So you have a big club, maybe you own a KL golf club. What's next? Oh, I want to own Liverpool. I want to own Manchester United. That's how these sort of things, and eventually if we go to colonize space, I want moon. I want Mars. Yeah, think about it. The greed of human has no bound one. And that is why 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. Now talking about those. Some by longing for it have wandered away from faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So we see this scenario, right, when people just go all out, they kind of damage themselves. Okay, a few more slides. Then we look at the counter verse. Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. So wealth here, actually the Greek word is mammonas, which is an English word, mammon. And that's actually a concept from a Chaldean, Babylon. And basically it's what they call wealth personified. So for the Babylonians, mammon is actually a demon, a spirit. So that is why when we look at this, we know Jesus is talking about the spirit of mammon, because it's a capital M. It's a name. It's an evil principality. It's a territorial level spirit. If a person desires nothing more than wealth and gain, then he or she has been captured by this evil spirit. That means your entire life is driven by that. So I think one of the things in 2020 is really exposing this. Because the other things, by the way, do you know that spirit of mammon doesn't just affect people who love money, but people who are in poverty also. When people who are in lack. By the way, sometimes you see people most affected by mammon are the poorest. It's not a matter of rich or poor. It's really how much you are entangled by that. Okay, so last slide already, conclusion. Last two slides. So 20, now I know this portion is like, a bit of depressive, bad news and things like that. That's why there's a part 2, okay? So part 1 is to lay out how do we make sense And I think we have to take it from a positive point of view. God is trying to teach us. Do not lose the teaching moment. So it has been a challenge, hardship for many of us. Yet we do not want to miss out the lessons that are being dished out by the Lord. The Lord is causing our ability to discern. Again, very interesting that this happens in the Mount of Heaven. I didn't even see the significance of this in the past few years, okay? So that we can see the plans of the enemy. See, many of us experience challenge and warfare in the area of money and finance. Right? This year, I think a lot of people have restriction. And even government is giving us 6 months moratorium, no need to pay bank loan. But it's still very tough for a lot of businesses. So we're facing challenges here. Many are facing situations where there are real possibilities of lack. Even though you can't travel, you're supposed to save money because your traveling budget is not being used, right? But still, people feel that pinch. So that's why every time we have a challenge, remember the spiritual principle is always to move in the opposite. So if we are facing issues concerning poverty and now this can be an entire teaching altogether. And just a few weeks ago, in a Try Advancing School, I think Lanshi and Andrea did one on wealth, poverty, and things like that. So that will be a really good teaching for you to go to review. So how do you move in the opposite? Be generous. And by the way, sometimes people hear the word generous, they're like, oh, you want my money? No, I'm not talking about money. And that's why, remember, every time we have first fruit, I always say it's important, no matter how busy you are, if you are not able to join any of the meeting, but we do encourage first fruit, because first fruit is where you come to reorder your priorities. And it's not just finance, it's your time, it's your emotion, it's your submission and alignment, and then it's your money. For a lot of people, money is the last issue, but for some people, it's the first issue. Everyone is different. But we come here, we want to move in the opposite. So I just give you one example, time. Some people feel like they never have enough time. You know what? If that is what you feel, you have to give even more time to God. You have to set aside that first fruit. We always give an example. Apostle Michelle and I, last year we hardly travel, so that's kind of good in a way. But when we travel, like if we go to some places a bit further one, it's like, especially Apostle Michelle, she will take 4 or 5 days, because she likes to go early and come back a bit later. And for me, I just like to go and come back. But still, it takes 2 or 3 days. And when we come back, Monday, Tuesday, we look at our files, it's like so high. And I always have this sort of encounter. 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 matter on my table, I always get it done day one. It's like I gave up all my weekend, I come back, I settle everything. So that's the thing, that when you give the first portion, which is, by the way, the least portion, but it's the heart attitude that counts, God suddenly expands what you have. So that's the thing with first fruit, and it's very, very important, okay? So the question for us today, will we take the lesson of God in 2020? Because some people are still not wanting to learn. Some people are not, some people are angry with God. Have you seen people who are angry with God over last year? I mean, if that's you, I want to encourage you, talk to Him and allow the healing and the prophetic words of God to flow through you, because God did not cause this, but God used it to teach us. So are we going to take the lesson and use it to propel us into the next year, actually this year? Today is 1st of January 2021. Yeah, moving on. So that's why I want to give you some good news. In part 2, we will see how God wants us to take this lesson going forward into the future.